Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies. As we conclude with Part 12, the French Transcendentalists of Masonic Orders of Fraternity by Manly P. Hall. The French Transcendentalist. The descent of the esoteric tradition in France presents few historical landmarks prior to the rise of Freemasonic speculation in the second half of the 18th century. By this time, there were occasional outstanding names, usually connected with alchemy or with speculations derived from the doctrines of the Knights Templars. Initiates from other countries visited France and left various mementos of their activities, but such secret orders as endured in the country found it expedient to remain obscure. The most famous and dramatic of the French Transcendentalists was Abbé Alphonse Louis Constant, who wrote under the Hebrewistic pseudonym Eliphas Levi Zahad. He was born in Paris in 1809 or 1810, the son of a poor and unschooled shoemaker. He showed early promise of mental brilliance and received a free education at the seminary of Saint Sulpice through the efforts of the cure of the parish. Alphonse was an excellent student, took minor orders, and finally became a deacon. Then suddenly, for reasons not entirely clear, but probably doctrinal, he was expelled from Saint Sulpice and came under the disfavor of the church. The departure of Alphonse from the seminary aroused considerable speculation among his biographers. Some suspected that he showed an early addiction to what the clergy might reasonably regard as diabolical arts. Others suggested that the young deacon had committed his mind to the doctrines of Rousseau, Voltaire, and other intellectual liberals. This seems the more likely, as one of his early writings, The Gospel of Liberty, was sufficiently socialistic to result in 6 months' imprisonment. Endeavors to trace the source of Eliphas Levi's esoteric knowledge have been seriously hampered because of insufficient biographical material. After an unhappy marriage, which terminated in 1847, Levi devoted himself completely to the esoteric arts and sciences and published several works on these subjects. These works revealed an extensive knowledge of the history and philosophy of magic and the lives of the principal exponents of mystical subjects from the earliest times. His use of reference material, however, did not always indicate a solid familiarity with the authorities to which he referred or from whose writings he quoted. Levi had a basic concept of transcendentalism, which he unfolded according to his own convictions. He used the works of other authors only to advance his own peculiar purposes. He must have had access to many rare and curious books, and he wrote with a strong, mystical quality of certainty. His style was dogmatic, dramatic, and fascinating. He was an artist of great skill and vivid imagination. The diagrams and figures with which he embellished his manuscripts were inspired by the works of earlier esoterics, but he developed them with genius and artistry. The magus, as he was called, depended largely on a circle of private students for the penetration of his message. Many of those who associated themselves with him were of high position and superior attainments. He left volumes of manuscripts and reams of letters, which were collected with loving care by his disciples. A number of Levi's unpublished works were copied by his students. Among the most industrious of these copyists should be mentioned Noah Kophahai and the Baron Sperdeleri. Eliphas Levi departed from this life in 1875. Although he had long been at variance with the church on points of doctrine, he received the last sacraments and died in the bosom of the faith. Waite reproduced a photograph of Levi lying in state with a large crucifix on his breast. One of the faithful disciples of Eliphas Levi described the Magus in these words: "He was of short and corpulent figure. His face was kind and benevolent, beaming with good nature, and he wore a long, gray beard which covered nearly the whole of his breast. His apartment resembled a bric-a-brac shop, with specimens of the most beautiful and rare old china, tapestry, and valuable paintings. In one of the rooms there was an alcove in which stood a bed covered with a gorgeous quilt of red velvet bordered with massive gold fringe, and a red velvet step stood before this magnificent couch, having a soft cushion also of red and gold laid on the top of it. He lived a quiet and retired life, having few friends. He had a wonderful memory and a marvelous flow of language, his expressions and illustrations being of the choicest and rarest character." After the impetus given by Eliphas Levi, those who had imbibed deeply of his doctrine attempted a restoration of ancient mystical orders and esoteric arts in France. About 1887, the Marquess Stanislaus de Guaita created a Kabbalistic Rosicrucian fraternity. Later, Dr. Gerard Ancos, better known as Papist, became the head of this group, which included such distinguished names as Sarpiladin and Paul Christian. These men, in search for inspiration, drew generously from the traditions of Martinism and the manuscripts left by Levi. There is agreement among the informed that at some time in the eventful life of the Magus, he had contacted the secret schools. When the disciple is found, the master is not far away. Kenneth Mackenzie, 9th degree, a member of the English Rosicrucian Research Group, knew Eliphas Levi quite intimately. He described him as a man of genius and learning and a member of the Brotherhood of Light, or Fratres Lucas, although such a membership would violate the historical boundaries of the Fratres Lucas. There is nothing to prove this order did not survive among a small group of initiated esoterics. See the Masonic Royal Encyclopedia, etc. Article on Levi. Miss Isabel Cooper Oakley, who did so much research into the activities of the mysterious Comte de Saint-Germain, was able to examine records of the Fratres Lucas, or the wise, mighty, and revered order of the Knights or Brothers of Light, which were for a time in the files of the Imperial Library of Petrograd. Although the order claimed that it was founded in the year 40 AD under the patronage of Saint John the Evangelist, no records of its independent existence were known prior to 1781. In the Wilco-Roque manuscripts examined by Mrs. Cooper Oakley, there were references to the 7 wise fathers, heads of the 7 churches of Asia. Were not these 7 wise fathers of the East the adepts of the secret schools? As Mr. Waite points out, the order comes therefore before us as that of a hidden church or holy assembly, ex hypothesi, like that of Eckarthausen, but passing into substituted manifestation by virtue of its ceremonial workings. See the Brotherhood of the Rosy Cross. No consideration of the forces molding the early life of Levi would be complete without mention of an incident which occurred on a certain morning in 1839. See History of Magic. An eccentric character named Alphonsius Quiros arrived at Levi's sanctum with an invitation to call upon the Mappa, a mysterious, bearded man of majestic demeanor and beautiful, mystic face, who held spiritual court in the squalid Paris garret. The Mappa, whose real name was Jano, wore the tattered cloak of a woman over his clothes and conveyed the impression of a destitute dervish. This strange prophet believed himself to be the reincarnation of Louis XVII, who had returned to save the world. The mapper was surrounded by several other entranced persons, as weird and eccentric as himself. Levi preserved several extracts from the words of Mappa. On that occasion, from the first hour of the fall, the task of humanity has been a great and terrible task of initiation. For this also the terms of that initiation are all equally sacred in the eyes of God. Their Alpha is our common mother Eve, while the Omega is Liberty, who is our common mother also. According to the account left by Levi, it was a disciple of Mappa whose fanatical conduct directly precipitated the French Revolution of 1848. There may be more to the story of Mappa than appeared on the surface. Levi certainly did not invent his transcendental doctrines, although he dressed them in a literary form entirely his own. He referred obscurely to his entry upon a faithful path and discussed the mysteries of initiation as one party to the facts. Levi derived great comfort and inspiration from the life and writings of the German mystical alchemist Heinrich Konrad. It is known to members of esoteric orders that Konrad has received initiation, but had not attended the highest grade. His work, or Amphitheater of Eternal Wisdom, published in Hanover in 1609, is illustrated with a series of magnificent symbolic plates. Levi interpreted these figures and the texts that accompanied them according to his own Kabbalistical convictions, and seems to have arrived at profound, if unorthodox, opinions regarding their true meanings. The philosophy of this French magus was founded on the concept of a secret esoteric teaching which descended from the most ancient times, flourished in Egypt, passed then to Greece, and finally was absorbed into the structure of the mystic Christian church. There is sufficient internal evidence in Levi's writings to justify his inclusion among the disciples of the esoteric schools. The French esoteric groups which stem from the teachings of Levi have left a valuable heritage of occult lore. Unfortunately, however, they were born out of a time from their magical speculations belong to an earlier cycle of alchemy, transcendentalism, and the Kabbalah. Levi's interpretations of Masonic rituals and symbols infused American Freemasonry through the writings of Albert Pike, who quoted and paraphrased many of the works of the French magus, but was wise enough to refrain from identifying the highly controversial source of his information. The urgencies of modern living have altered the public taste, and the lore of antiquity is now only of interest to a limited number of research students. The trend is away from the marvelous and the miraculous, and towards the useful and the necessary. The great school and its initiates have discarded the cloak of Hermetic fables and have selected their new symbolism from the collective emergencies of contemporary living. The universal truths of the secret doctrine are stated in terms of politics, industry, economics, management, and labor. International accord, the arbitration of religious and social differences, and the systematic advancement of the plan for world welfare supply the ingredients of a new application of Hermetic chemistry. Thus the plan unfolds, the principles remain the same, the needs enlarge, and the moral crisis is perpetual. 3,000 years ago, Memphis of the White Walls was the college city of the Egyptian adepts. Here the initiates governed their school according to divine and universal laws. Memphis was the archetype of the world city, the union of nations, the one world, the philosophic commonwealth which is to come. The goal of these secret societies is the revelation in the sphere of mortal activity of the design of the invisible college. The very earth itself is to be the campus, nations and states, the classrooms, humanity, the student body, those dedicated to essential progress, the teachers, and the eternal sciences and arts revealed by God through nature, the curriculum, until all men of towardness recognize both their responsibilities and their opportunities. The work of the secret schools is not finished. The day will come when that which has been taught under oath and obligation shall bring equality and freely to all men, not because it has been brought down to them, but because they themselves have been risen up by vision and experience and have claimed their eternal heritage. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.